Hello, this is Melissa Hale Spencer, the editor of the Altamont Enterprise, with really a huge surprise. Compliments of Dennis Sullivan, our beloved Field Notes writer, who has enticed his cousin, Tim O'Shea, who is from Ireland, from County Kerry, and is a musician touring the United States, and he has made time to come talk to us, so thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I would just love to start by hearing about how you came to music. How did you become...
Oh, God.
How did you become a musician?
I think it was more a question of not escaping it. It was impossible to escape it.
How?
I didn't
How
come to it. I mean, Dennis will vouch for that. It's just there.
It was in your family,
both
in
sides,
your community?
Yeah, both, everywhere.
Both? So tell us about your family. Who sings or does what?
Well, on my father's side, which is the Dennis relation, my grandmother, who you would have known, alongside of having 13 children, she played the concertina, which is like a small accordion, and she played it with a smile.
And
that's what I remember.
Well, having 13 children alone would make it hard to have time for anything,
but
let alone
she
music.
loved it, and it was always in the old houses. It was above the fireplace where they kept the tea and the sugar and the salt. Everything that had to be kept dry was kept there. I remember distinctly her putting it on the mantelpiece.
All the important things.
And nobody would else touch it.
Oh, my gosh. So from...
No, that's true. That's not made up. It sounds made up, but it's true.
No, it does. It sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So from a very young age, you were exposed to music.
And my father and all her children played.
And they all played the concertina?
No, they the man. Do you see the concertina was a
female?
It's not cool to say it now, but it was the woman's accordion as such.
All right.
Because it was more compact and easier to play physically. But
So what did the men play?
They played the button accordion, which is one note in, one note out. But it's a bigger machine and more physical to play it, shall we say.
And did you master that as well?
I ran from that because it was a loud, dangerous thing. So I said, I'm not playing that. No. But everybody in Ireland plays what we call the tin whistle or the penny whistle.
Okay.
Every school kid in Ireland gets one of those, whether you like it or not.
And did you like it?
I did, but I didn't like the teaching of it.
Because you just had absorbed music through your family without having to be formally taught, or?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, a bit of both. But that seemed like work with paper and writing out stuff.
So do you play entirely by ear?
I do, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when did you come to play the guitar? That's the instrument you used.
That was the rebellious teens, I guess. Yeah, first there was a drum kit and a bass guitar, but they were quite loud. So the guitar was mobile and it was a big hit with the ladies.
And is it still?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
So at what point in your life did you start taking to the road and touring and
that was a mistake as
music?
Well. Yeah. That happened as well. I didn't make that happen. It happened.
But what caused it?
We do live in an island. That's the first and foremost.
Okay.
So you must remember that. So if you put too many feet going west or east, you end up in water. So when you run out of road, you have to get on a boat or a plane and see what's on the other side.
And what was your first leaving the country to share your music tour? Where was it to?
That's a good question. Wow. I have never been asked that question. That's a very good question. Oh, I'd have to think about that one. That's a good question now.
But I mean, you've done this continuously for decades now, right?
Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm very old.
Well, you look quite youthful for being very old.
Yeah.
But what?
I started doing it professionally in 95. I went around the world. I started in London. I ended up in London, but I took in a lot of places in between.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and I took my trusty instruments with me, and everywhere I went, I was never threatened, robbed, or cajoled into anything.
But to see the world as a musician, tell us about that. What is that like?
Well, I suppose that was before the internet, about 25 years ago.
Right.
And it was just going, where I wanted to go, just go. And you meet people.
Did you have a favorite place that you performed?
There was so many places. What I did like was Fiji is an interesting place. The people there are quite interesting.
Tell us about Fiji.
They're Melanesian.
Yeah.
which to the untrained eye would be African-looking people, as distinct from Polynesian, which would be the Samoans and the Tongans and all them big lads. You don't mess with them. And then they have the Micronesians, which would be what we would say Asian. But they're Melanesian and they're quite interesting. But then back in the bad old days when the British were running the planet, they brought over the Indians from India. Mm-hmm. And so it's you have Melanesian and Indian. So they call them Fijian Indians.
So on this tour, did you play exclusively Irish music?
Oh, I think so, yeah. But they love any music. Most Pacific people love music. The Polynesians can't get enough of it, especially singing.
What I had been picturing until this very moment, or 5 minutes ago, was that you would be playing largely to people who had come from Ireland or their ancestors had. And, because around here we have a lot of festivals where people gather to hear Irish music and they have Irish ancestors. But here you are in Fiji. I mean, are they people that are even familiar with Irish music?
I put it like this to you. Probably not, but they're island people for a start, so we have that in common. The other thing, they love music. And it's like a ball game. No matter what size or shape the ball is, it's a ball game. It doesn't matter.
I like that. So music
so if it's a football or a baseball
or
a golf ball, it's the thrill of the hunt.
Yeah.
But with music, it doesn't matter what language or what it sounds like. If it's folk music, it's folk music. And people are drawn to it. The advantage of Irish folk music, I would say, this is just my own humble opinion, is that aside from all the other folk music, which are basically call and response and rhythmically driven from below, ours is driven from above. It's a melodic, rich melodic tradition. So any accompaniment or drumming or any other kind of thing isn't necessary. It enhances it, but it doesn't come from there.
So it can be just voice. It can be entirely...
So melodically it stands out, I would say, in terms of complexity and construction. Out of all the folk musics of the world, that's what seems to what you hear about what attracts people to it. Huh. It's a complex melodic construction. So
I'm just trying to grasp this idea that since 1995, how much of the time are you home in Ireland?
Oh, most of the time, about 8 months, because we have a very strong tourism. It's the main industry in Ireland is tourism.
Yes.
And luckily for us, the Irish pub or the Irish music, they're entwined and ingrained in part of that attraction. Is what brings people to Ireland, as well as the scenery and the people. This is what we're told.
So even when you're performing at home, you're performing for foreigners a lot of times.
Most of the time, but they're always tuned into it,
Yeah.
And that's where you learn about it and you shape it, as well. You're informed. A lot of these people are informed about it. Of course, the great thing, Riverdance has done wonders.
Oh,
that was our Renaissance.
Yeah.
And that's quite recent, but I mean the chieftains before that. But the Riverdance has opened the whole world. No matter what creed or colour you are, everyone's heard of Riverdance, I would say, at this stage.
I would say you're
so you
right.
take it from there out, and I mean the explosive excitement that offers, that transcends, and has its roots in what we do.
Do you do dancing too?
No, I wasn't gifted with the dance, Jean, I'm afraid.
Well, so how do you decide what it is you're going to play? Do you change it up on different tours or depending on the audience? Or
Oh, you would do, yeah. I mean, for instance, the Americans have everything.
What do you mean?
They hear everything. I mean, I'm sure in this town or the next town you could hear a Mongolian throat singing duet, or some kind of Georgian from Georgia, Russia, monk Gregorian chant, or you could hear some guys from Bali or a couple of lads from Tralee.
Just because
on any one night.
It's so diverse here to begin with. I see.
That has a plus and minus. The plus is that people are attuned to other customs and folk traditions. That's the plus. The minus is they probably can't differentiate.
They can't tell one from another.
It all sounds, similar to lots of the untrained ear. But I would say that there's a critical mass of people, because folk music is a minority music, let's be honest. So there is enough people. Where we're sitting now, there's probably 2 million people or more in a 50-mile radius. If we got 0.00001% of those into a room, like we will in Voorheesville tonight, we're happy with that. So
yes,
that's
he's
the plus.
playing at the Voorheesville Public Library tonight. So, what is your ideal audience then? Do you like a small group that you feel you're engaged with, or do you prefer a large crowd that has energy coming at you?
I think anyone that's interested in listening is always a good thing. And participating, don't forget, an audience doesn't just listen, they participate. And listening is participation. But when they clap and cheer and jump around, as long as they don't throw rocks, bottles, chains, cans, you're good.
Well, so many of us now listen to music that's recorded, it's on an iPod and something. And tell us, why it's important to have this live music.
I think you that yourself, that the recorded process, and this girl here is doing a fantastic. Rose is her name.
Yes,
she's on the buttons
Rose.
Here, and she's very nimble. Wow, look at those fingers. And she's very nimble, and she's reading dials and numbers. That's one aspect, and even the small little boxes that we're talking into right now is a tremendous advantage to the likes of us. Yeah. But of course, it is a tool, and you can distill what you have. But the essence of it, we're human beings, what transcends through the air and through emotions and whatever. There's no replacing that. Otherwise, we're not human beings anymore. Sure, we're not.
So you're a philosopher as well as a musician.
It's all philosophy, isn't it, Dennis? Yeah. I mean, I was watching on the plane coming over here, the Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper one. Do you know that movie?
I haven't seen it, but I think I know.
There was one great line in it. There was lots of great lines, but one stood out, is that you have to have something to say, and you have to have somebody to say it to, but it has to be relevant to the people you're saying it to. And that's eternal. That's always been the case. Despite iPods and iPhones and whatever.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you have letters before your name, letters in your name, or the ones I'll get, hopefully, RIP when I'm gone. It doesn't matter. Or what colour or creed or who you are. There's a transmission there. You're either open to receive or you're not. So hopefully, if we can broadcast that message out, and we use whatever skills or emotive content we have in our bones, and people get it.
Well, I liked your idea when you were talking about it as a minority sort of music.
It is a minority music.
Of the folk,
It is, yeah. It's a vernacular, yeah.
It is. So what does that say about your particular... Do you focus on music that comes specifically from County Kerry?
Oh, no.
No? So
no.
How did you learn your repertoire? What parts of your country
we did grow up with its surroundings, so that was osmotically infused into every part of our being. But then, of course, we all our neighbours, everyone on the island and the neighbouring island, our friends across the Little Sea, the Celtic Sea as they call it, there's lots of distillations there and commonalities. And the more we uncover the collections, the more commonalities there are. It's all coming from the same place. We look the same. We almost speak the same.
So does it embody the history as well?
Yes, of course. That is the storytelling element is vital.
And
yeah,
I know you brought with you two of your instruments, and I'm hoping you can give us a little sample of some of the things you do and kind of talk about it.
Absolutely.
I looked up that drum, and I can't even say the name. So could you tell us what it is and the history of the drum that you play?
Oh, the drum?
Yeah.
The drum is, and Rose had it here, and she's very astute. Like, these young ones, you couldn't be up to them. But she had it. You hearing that, listeners? Wake up! Time to get up.
It does make you want to move to the beat.
Actually, I found out this thing recently, and I'm someone who arrives at a realization much later than most people, because there's a bit of sifting and levels to be ascertained. And one of them is, I figure nobody walks away from drums, ever. It's just a heartbeat. You're drawn to it. So whether it's in the distance or nearby or next door, unless it's 4 o'clock in the morning and the guys said, a couple of Guinness too many or something.
Well, no, I think there's been pieces written about how they used to recruit soldiers, because they'd have this drum beat and they'd just fall along behind, and the next thing they knew, they were enlisted.
There you go. It's part of it. And actually, this one, seeing you've touched on that, the original function was for ritual purposes. It's called bodhrán, Bodhra, with a grav,
accent,
French or accent.
Bodhrán.
Yeah,
okay.
you
I didn't know
lengthen
how
the
to
A.
say that.
Bodhrán, yeah.
Bodhrán.
Bodhrán. Just think of Ron and bow to it.
Okay.
And it means the maker of deafness, or the dull sounding. And it's just a skin. And actually in Ireland we're the only ones in the entire European continent that play it. The nearest guys to play anything like it are the North African lads. But that's a whole other story.
But isn't that another story? How interesting. On a different continent, a very similar kind of drum.
Because of the seaway was the highway that back then.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm talking not before last Tuesday, well before last Tuesday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
But this drum anyway, but the ritual aspect of it still survives in Ireland today, long before St. Patrick, God be good to him, came around, or any of the other fellas with beards and dreadlocks. We have this tradition still alive 2 times in the year, and it mirrors other traditions like the Spanish and South American stuff. On the day after Christmas, we call it St. Stephen's Day. You've heard of that?
I have.
Yeah, or the English call it Boxing Day, but that's another story. But we call it St. Stephen's Day because there's in the fables and all the ancient stories, St. Stephen that was a Christianization of Wren's Day. The wren, do you know what a wren is? It's the smallest bird in Europe. He's tiny, smaller than a robin, but your robins are bigger than ours. But we won't get into that.
Okay.
But the wren, anyway, the wren was the king of the birds because they had a competition. Who could fly the highest, the longest? And of course they were all flying, and the swans, the big ones, went down, and the Brent geese and all them, they all went down. But the eagle was there soaring, and he was made sure there was nobody below him. But just when he was getting tired, there was a wren sitting on his neck, and then he went, and of course the eagle had nothing left in the tank, but he hitched the ride, so he could stay there wherever.
So the wren is the king of the birds. I never knew this, and it's
Europe,
because of his cleverness.
His cleverness and his ingenuity and his size.
Oh, wow.
He outwitted the great eagle. Golden eagle would have been. But anyway, all the birds and animals saw that, and they said, "Oh, that's the king of the birds." So whenever a wren died, he got a king's burial. And along with that tradition, then there was parading. And it was one of the times in the year you could masquerade yourself and be whoever you wanted. And the drum was central to that.
So there would be a parade with a drum and people wearing just various costumes.
And the deceased wren on a stick, usually.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Now they don't do that. They just have the party without the wren. And they collect for charity. That's what they do. So that's St. Stephen's Day, which is Wren's Day. And the 3 parts of Ireland where that survives is in Kerry and Cork. We call it the biddies, or the Wren boys. The biddies, I'll get to that in a minute. On the East Coast, Waterford, Wexford, they call it the mummers. Mummers, and there's a connection to England, north of England there. And then in Northern Ireland, across the 6 counties near Belfast, they call it the rhymers, because they have a specific set of rhymes that they still use today. But it's all on the same tradition. The other big day then, of course, if you map the Celtic and the Christian calendars, they overlap. On February the 1st in Ireland, that's spring, first day of spring. So we celebrate that, and it's become St. Bridget's Day, which I believe is one of the few female saints, certainly the first one. She was hanging around when St. Patrick was around, not too long after he took off. She kind of took over the scene there. But St. Bridget's Day, and then that's the same tradition, we do it again, minus the wren on that one. So we call it the biddies.
You were going to say more about the biddies.
Yeah, the biddies.
I think of biddies as old ladies. What are biddies?
Yeah, biddy is an old lady, or a slang for Bridget.
Okay.
Yes, they just call it biddies. So they do that, and that tradition still exists. So the whole idea of masquerading and being whoever you are and going crazy within the laws of the land, of course, that whole thing. But the drum is central to that. And of course, after that tradition, then as a war instrument, there was bigger ones, 20-inch ones. Today it's like 14 and a half inch ones, maybe 16. But the big one, they were used for battle with the war pipes, which are the big, noisy bagpipes, you know those ones?
I do.
They were actually invented in Ireland, but we gave them to the Scottish as a joke, but they haven't figured it out yet. Sorry, guys. So I'll just play the sound of this one. You might like to hear it. Originally it was played with the hand, gives you a very tribal So it's goat skin. He sacrificed his pelt for this. You know. So that's skin against skin. So it's very tribal, but of course we got very fancy and we invented sticks or beaters, tippers or kippings. Kipping is the Gaelic for a small stick. And then that allows you to do a lot of other... So it gives you that.
That is remarkable that you can get that variety of sounds from that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh.
I was playing one night in Killarney, in a place in Killarney where I'm from, playing in a place, and this old man passed the door with sticks. He had walking canes. And he stopped and he came back in the door, and his wife or the other woman or whoever she was that was with him came in, and we got a seat for him, and he sat down and he was really enjoying the drum, you know. And so after the gig was over, he comes up to me and he had 2 hearing aids, and he goes, hello, he says. I said, hello. And he said, I really enjoyed that drum, you know. And he was from San Francisco. I don't know if that's a San Franciscan accent, but anyway.
Pretty close.
For the purpose of usage here today, we'll just go with that. He goes, oh, I love that drum, all those sounds you could get out of there with just a small drum. Do you know who I am? And I said, not a clue. Do you know? And then I said, do you know who I am? And he said, no, you're the guy who plays the drum. And then he goes, oh, he says, I played the timpani in the San Francisco Orchestra for 44 years, he said. And he said, if I knew that drum was around, I wouldn't have played those goddamn things, he said. So, you know.
Is this a true story?
Oh, it's a true story, yeah. Yeah. Would I lie to you?
I don't know.
No, that's a true story, yeah. I don't know if you know anything about timpani, but the kettle drums, they're massive.
Yeah.
And they're foot pedals, and you're continuously tuning them. And they're a very demanding instrument. And he said, you know, with this thing, if he knew that was around, he would never have played those.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
That's a great story. So when you perform, is this like just the drum, or is it part of an ensemble, or is it something that goes with some kind of, as you said, there were rhymes that sometimes were used?
A bit of everything, yeah. It's flexible. You know, most traditional music is a solo, and the ensembles came later, but you can make it work, you know. Because most of the melodic content of the Irish music is a high-pitched sound on fiddles or flutes or what else, all the other instruments. As far as I understand, there's 18 instruments used in Irish music. You know, some have been adaptations from other cultures.
Yeah.
And there's 3 unique Irish instruments.
And they are the harp, I know that.
The harp is our national symbol. That's very unique in structure and sound. And that's been there for thousands of years. And then you have the drum here, the bodhrán. That's our national drum. Nobody else has that or plays like us. And the third one is the uilleann pipe. It's a bagpipe pumped with the elbow. And
can you say the name again?
Uilleann.
Oh, uilleann.
Uilleann pipe, yeah.
Okay.
But I was playing in India a couple of years ago with an Irish charity, and we did this concert in Calcutta. And they had an 8-piece Indian... they call it classical, but I would call it folk because they're playing folk instruments, but it's highly structured. And they had a load of singers and 47-piece choir, and the 2 of us, myself and an Irish singer. And we had a great night. It was a whole story. I won't go into it because I don't think we have the time. But the guys, the Indian musicians, were amazed by the Irish drum. They never saw anything or heard anything like it. And you think that would be Drum Central, Indians, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm just fascinated with just the... you'd think of it as clashing cultures when you mention Calcutta and Irish music, but yet here you find this common ground with other musicians.
Well, no, we weren't playing with them. That would be impossible.
Okay.
Because their meter and their scales are completely different. All Eastern is completely different.
They were
Western.
just listening to it.
Well, we had inserts. There was an Irish involvement. It's a big, long story, but anyway, there was an Irish nun involved in the story, and that's who we were representing. And they were retelling the story. Essentially, one of the Vivekananda, he's one of the gurus. His philosophies were very complex for the ordinary people to absorb, because you must remember the literacy rate in India today and back then. But Tagore, who would be you've heard of him, Dennis there's nodding. Thank you, Dennis. That makes me feel really good. But he'd be the W.B. Yeats or the Thackeray or something of India, and he distilled the philosophies into poems, and suddenly it took off in the common mind. These complex philosophies. And our job was to make music with the woman, the female singer, who's a phenomenal singer. Chandra Bali was her name. Look her up. And she made songs of the poems. So there's a 3-stage thing.
Oh my gosh!
But it was a whole religious thing.
Can you say the name of the poet again? That's what I want to look up.
Tagore. Tagore. Yeah. But so anyway, that was the whole thing. But we were just doing an Irish representation of the Irish nun, sort of. We were just putting her in the picture, and there was a narration. We were there for hours, like, and there was a whole religious ceremony before that. That went on for 2.5 hours. And we were behind the curtain waiting for that to finish.
Oh, my goodness.
And then we had to go to see the guru and the pope, their pope, and the whole thing. It was a big, long, protracted thing.
So out of all these many years of travel and incredible situations, do any others particularly stand out as exceptional? That the music has brought you to a place or an understanding?
Well, I learned again the hard way and the slow way for me usually, is that the bardic tradition, and Dennis knows plenty about this, where the harpers, we talked about the harpers of old, they would be the oldest existing tradition in Ireland, going into the early Middle Ages and further back, 1,000 years actually. In the Middle Ages, and the 1700s it got revived, but the actual harping tradition goes back 1,000 or more years. But they were third in line. There was the king, the knights, and the bards, both the musicians and the poets. But when you get asked to play for a wedding or a funeral for the same family, I mean, to me, that's unbelievable. Because you're the soundtrack of that most poignant moment. And a wedding and a funeral, to me, are the same thing.
How are they the same?
Because their emotions are raw. And people are at the edge of their known emotion. They're right out there at the edge. And it's tested, both in a funeral and a wedding. To me, they're the same thing.
But is the music the same, or the music?
No, it's different music, of course. But I'm just saying, if you're elected by a family to do those two events, that's an incredible honour. Even to this day, they don't even know it. But to me, that is the ultimate compliment. If you can be the soundtrack to someone's edge of their emotion, I mean, there's nothing better than that. I wouldn't even charge for something like that.
Yeah. Because
the payback is, there you have it, that's it. There's nothing finer, like. That's somebody's life you're talking about. And you're in it,
Yeah, and you're in it forever, because the memories stay.
You're indelibly marked in those, and that's just 2 incidences that I can think of, And everyone here and everyone listening will always remember those, and then remember that moment, how they felt at the precise moment, that genesis, that pivotal time when somebody says something, or something happens, or whatever, or you meet someone, or whatever. It's a kind of a unification, but it's also a departing, but it's a demarcation, I would say.
Yeah, and I know with people with Alzheimer's, even in the family, when you play a familiar music, it can reach places
it goes
that
beyond
words
the known world.
Yeah.
It goes beyond the known world. People can't understand it, but it works.
Somehow indelibly in your...
But you have to learn these things, But if you're the provider of that experience, I mean, there's no greater thing, like.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well,
so you also brought your guitar with you. Can we have a little lesson on that as well?
Well, the great writer from Ireland, his name is, if I can remember it now, because this is my 3rd week on the road, so memory gets a bit... Anyway, I'll remember.
You must get exhausted. I mean, you're staying different places almost every night. And
top-class treatment.
Yeah.
5-star, especially in Voorheesville.
Well, I know Dennis, but you must be staying at a lot of strange places, too.
Yeah, Margaret and Dennis here are making this all work. So this man, anyway, he was a great compiler of music and recording. Brown Down Brannock, Brendan Walsh, to those not of the faith. He collected and he wrote extensively about Irish music and its genesis and where it's going, where it's come from and all that. But he said the guitar was the closest thing to the harp, and for me it fits in the overhead. Ben, You see, as distinct from that other monstrosity.
Yeah.
You know, the insides of a piano, I call it. So, with its different tuning there, for all the people who play, we can access it's a modal, it's a arrangement of notes and scales that fits perfectly that tuning. And it's a kind of a resonant sound as distinct from the usual tuning. The blues guys use it in a different pitch. The dominant note in Irish music is D. Blues is probably G or E. But it's the same application of a resonant sound, you know. So you, with a small bit of it, small little bit of imagination and participation from yourselves and the audience, you can approximate a harp sound. And the Baroque tradition, are you familiar with that? It's basically Middle Ages, late Middle Ages. And we have a lot of those recordings, or not recordings, well, they were recorded on paper. So I'll just play one of those. There you go. That's nearly as old as Methuselah's cat.
That was just beautiful.
The harp music is the old music, and they did record it, they scripted it, but of course they didn't have iPods or, Zoom recorders back then. But it's the oldest music. In fact, one of the High Kings of Ireland who went to school in Killarney, Brian Boru, County Kildare man, he played the harp. And that's the harp we see in Trinity College, the symbol of Ireland. It's a smaller one with brass strings. But that guitar is as close as I can get to that, or want to get to it.
Well, it just left me wordless, which for me is very unusual. Good. But our time has just gone so fast. Do you have any closing thoughts, anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to, or that just are the most important and that we've missed?
Well, I'd like to thank Dennis and Margaret there for making things happen, and yourself, Melissa, and Rose for doing the front of stuff, and what you're doing is great.
Well,
giving a voice to the likes of us,
great.
And we're moving along the road and keeping the wheel rolling, and you oil the wheels by this kind of activity.
Well,
and that's important.
You.
Yes, indeed. And I hope the listeners enjoy and come to Voorheesville tonight in the library, isn't it? And we're in Saratoga too, in the inn on Sunday night.
Oh,
yeah.
And where? Which inn?
The Saratoga Inn. The inn in Saratoga.
The inn in Saratoga.
Yeah, that's
see
on
if I can
Sunday
find an
night.
address for this.
Yeah. And where else are we again? Saratoga Senior Centre and Charlottesville and Pittsfield. If you go on the website, you'll get...
Tell us the website.
It's 3 W's,
Right.
And then the dot.
Right.
Don't leave out the dot.
Don't leave out the dot.
You should never leave out a punctuation. Isn't that right, Dennis? And then my name, Timoshea. And then there's another A, A-N-D, so that's 2 A's.
Right.
Friends, FRIENDS.com.
So it's basically Tim O'Shea and Friends.
.com.
Right.
And then we'll have a dancer, wonderful young dancer here from Latham. He's no lumbago or arthritis, and he can jump around. He could actually kick the light bulbs out if you let him, but we're not going to let him do that. And then we have a fiddler from Dublin who lives in Malta, and he's joining us as well. So
Oh my gosh! So you put together a whole
a little
ensemble
show,
on the
yeah.
road.
And
Oh.
Dennis will come along and do some wonderful poems too.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great.
yeah. So there's a multimedia extravaganza. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Rose.